Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, or good evening, or good afternoon. For me here, it's very early in the morning, but we have the whole globe covered here. We have Paul over in Hong Kong, we have Sebastiaan in Amsterdam, Hiran in Dubai, and Steve in the UK. The independent republic of the UK these days, but we won't push them too much on Brexit, so we'll leave them alone today. Today's going to be an interesting panel. You may not have noticed it, but when we put out the agenda, you saw that there was a thing called up in the air. And what did we mean by that? Well, quite frankly, we feel that the whole industry right now is up in the air. Nobody knows what post-COVID is going to look like. We've seen massive disruptions. We've seen ports now. Long Beach yesterday reported 70 ships anchored. So if you have something on those ships and you're planning it for a Christmas present, forget it. You're not going to get it. In air freight, horror stories at airports. Chicago was in the press recently. Los Angeles coming up with delays that are just beyond belief. People waiting 21 days to get their cargo out of a GHA warehouse in Chicago. That's unheard of, even during wartime or anything else that we've been through. So the world is changing and everything is up in the air. So that's the theme of what we're talking about. So basically, we're looking at new things, new temporary phenomena like preighters. I hate that name, but preighters. How long will they stay in? How long will governments allow it to stay in? They're severely restricted, of course. The GSSAs, which basically are airlines in effect, because they're providing the services, the same services that an Emirates or a Qatar with their own sales force. Well, they have GSAs as well. So we're very, very lucky to have them in today. And as far as I'm concerned, and this is, I don't think just my personal opinion, the future belongs to the ground. And what I mean by that is, quite frankly, and no offense to Boeing and Airbus, but any idiot can fly an airplane nonstop between 2 points. The situation that we have, 777 competing with an A350 is no big deal. Sense of the word. And what I mean by that is whatever happens on the ground is going to differentiate ourselves. So as far as I'm concerned, the airports and the GHA can make or break us. And so what's up in the air we would like to discuss today. And we got a great panel. I want to thank you, gentlemen. No diversity here. Unfortunately, we don't have a lady representative. What we did have it on the airports panel and others, but that doesn't matter. Your experience counts and your voice is heard, and we'd like you to share what you're telling your customers. So today, I'd like to introduce our panel so we can have as much time as possible that we can speak about the subject matter. So as we go through the topics today, gentlemen, before I introduce you, I'd really like to see a lot of interaction between yourself, and some of the first questions we're going to ask are for the whole panel, and the interactivity between the group of you representing airlines, multiple airlines in the case of the GSSA, Emirates, who are very active in both products and also carrying large amounts of cargo for individual customers, and of course, Paul, handling it all on the ground, and HACTL is world renowned for being probably the best facility going when it comes to experience and quality. So I'm very anxious for the interactivity between you. So let me briefly introduce everybody. Good morning, or no, actually good evening, Paul, and thank you for coming in on your day off with that beautiful picture of your facility behind you. One of the benchmarks when we do our airport work, everybody keeps saying, well, can't we build a multi-facility like HACTL has? And so your name is always coming up, and airports around the world are jealous of what you've achieved. But Paul joined HACTL in 2000, and he was appointed as General Manager Service Delivery in 2018. So he's been around for quite a while in our business. Yeah. Thankfully, I guess, Paul, you picked up a team over there with Vivian and the rest that really help you in your day-to-day. And Paul oversees all of HACTL's operations, including cargo terminal services, ramp services, and customer services. So he's exactly the right person we need today. So welcome, Paul.
Hiran, it's my pleasure, John.
Thank you. Hiran, I think Emirates, he's the Emirates Senior Vice President, Cargo Planning and Freighter for Emirates Sky Cargo. And I think we go back to what, 1990 or so, Paul, Hiran, I'm sorry.
That's right.
A real pleasure having you on this thing. And when it comes to freighters and also the optimization of the freighters, there's no better person than speaking to Hiran. He's worked in the airline industry for over 34 years. He joined Emirates in 1986 as a cargo instructor and has since then worked in various capacities within Emirates Cargo, but always in the freight division, which is great to see that you prove that you can make a career in cargo. He was also involved in the assessment and the choice of the freighters that Emirates have today, and also involved very much with the deployment of the belly capacity these days, because in talking to one of the route managers over in America a couple of months ago with an airport, they said, we go where cargo tells us. Now that was an interesting statement. We've never seen that before. So overall, the responsibility for the freighter program, and as well as overseeing cargo revenue optimization between the Emirates Sky Cargo Group. And I can imagine controlling freighters today is a license to print money. From what I've seen, but I know you look at it with a better view than just that. Sebastiaan Scholte, he's the CEO of the KALES group. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, he's a GSSA with a long history in the airlines. Sebastiaan started his cargo aviation career in 1997, working for Aeromexico in Mexico City, of all places. So that must have been an interesting learning ground for you as you progressed your career. He used to work for Cargolux at their headquarters, and he was head of marketing and special projects, which again added to his base of experience. And as a consequence of that, in 2010, he was appointed CEO of Jan de Rijk Logistics. And for those of you that don't know about Jan de Rijk, I think they're changed their name, or I don't know what the situation is anymore. I've lost track, but Jan de Rijk is one of the largest road feeder service companies and also handling third-party logistics. So that experience must have been really added a lot to your knowledge. In May of 2012, he was appointed chairman of the Cool Chain Association, which that experience is also very relevant when we talk about services that are needed in the future. And he's currently the CEO of the KALES Group since 2020. Our last speaker, this man here in the middle with the very British tie on, Steve Dawkins. He's the CEO of the Air Logistics Group, and that's a real success story in the world. Steve started Air Logistics. He was the founder of Air Logistics over 29 years ago. He started and worked to learn the business from the ground up, like I did actually. He's now the CEO of Air Logistics Group, which has 88 offices in 44 countries, and all that in 28 years. So that's a fantastic thing, and the learning curve of that, Steve, must have been phenomenal. They represent over 176 airlines in one way or the other. So I mean, the voice of the GSSA and the voice of an airline is the same, in my opinion. Air Logistics is also rapidly expanding in Asia, which is great also for today's discussion because he brings a more global view. So that being said, welcome everybody. Welcome to the panel. And I know people are going to be interested in what you have to say. And I know that because I am. And if I'm interested in it, I can imagine that the customers that you have also would like to know, with everything up in the air now, where are we going to go after post COVID? So realize that post COVID, where there's a lot of doubt. I was listening to BBC News this morning, where the head of Airbnb said, forget it, business travel is never going to come back to what it was. More people working from home means they're going to take longer vacations because they can. So we'll see a shift in the way the passenger airlines deploy their capacity and what type of aircraft they use. That's number one. Sea and air right now are failing. Quite honestly, I think we have failed, not because of the fact we didn't have a crystal ball and could predict where we were going to go after this, but we've had to meet expectations which really nobody could be prepared for, and that is with 50% of the capacity suffering massive downturns, the freighters picking up the other 50% all of a sudden expected to pick up 100%. It just doesn't work. And then if you add that with airports being in the news, some of them were situations now on the ground handling side, Paul, where your colleagues just failed to perform. Now, there's been a lot of blame put on COVID, saying that the staff weren't available and whatever. I'd like to hear your opinion on what's happening on that afterwards. But how can we expect the customer, the beneficial cargo owners, the guys who supply the cargo on the import or export side to the forwarders, to the airlines directly or whatever, how can we expect them to believe that they can still consider logistics on a global basis, sourcing globally, and systems like just in time? How can that ever work again? Do we have to have inventory just in case we have another thing like this? Do we have to revert back to moving things by sea freight into distribution centers where we're going to lose out? We have to talk about that. So for the panel, basically to kick it off, and maybe, Hiran, maybe as an airline, you could take this one to start the dialogue, but are we headed to a world where clients this group depend on for traditional revenue, the forwarders see no hope but to continue to own controlled capacity developments, which we've seen CMA, the large shipping group, saying they're going to start their own airline with 777s and A330s. We've seen Geodis moving in that direction. We've always had DGF moving in that direction. And quite frankly, if I was having my own airplane and I'm the one dealing directly with the shipper, I would put the best cargo on my own airplanes. So if they've gone this way, is it because we failed as an industry? Or is it just a circumstance that they're exploiting because of the fact that the passenger fleet were put on the ground? Hiran, maybe you could start off the discussion. I'd be really interested to hear what your customers are telling you.
So look, Stan, I think we need to also step back a bit into history as well, where we've always seen ups and downs in the cargo industry. You see, the industry has always been boom or bust, right? So overcapacity results, and then there's a bust, no more investment into capacity, into freighters particularly. So the industry has also had for a long time belly capacity that has been kind of misused, for a better word of it, or undervalued, if it were. So the true value sometimes of air cargo has in history has not been in place. We've seen in the past that forwarders have gone into their own capacity. Typically, it happens when capacity gets tight. People want to secure capacity, make sure they have their main pipelines covered. But are the forwarders able to provide a true network? Because if you are to provide a true network, and today you mentioned on it about global sourcing, you really need to serve globally. You need to serve global networks, because production happens not in one. Sourcing is sorry, Stan?
We lost the audio there for a second. Just if you could repeat that, please.
Yeah, so I was saying that that sourcing keeps changing as well, right? People, manufacturers look for lower cost, countries, regions, and so on. So are forwarders able to provide really that network capability? And then consumption also happens in varied countries. Yes, you could provide maybe the key pipelines, but can you provide a network? So I think today's forwarder capacity, or forwarder networks or own capacity, is to ensure they see that ocean freight is in distress. They see that belly capacity is not coming for a while, so everyone is trying to secure capacity for the foreseeable future until, as you say, things are up in the air.
Well, that being said, perhaps Steve, Sebastian, you could chip in, and then I'll look at you, Paul, to give us some comments on what your multitude of customers are telling you as well. Sebastian, Sebastian and Steve, what, representing so many airlines, what's your feeling? Are you going to be able to represent them in the way that Hiran described?
First of all, good morning, Stan. Thanks for the opportunity to join this team and say a few words about our business. But I think Hiran came with a very good point. Network, I think that's a very crucial thing. I think as a supplier to the aviation business, that's what we've tried to do. And there's a number of strong organizations that have built a network across many countries that we can match this mismatch of capacity between our forwarding clients and the airlines, with the support of cargo community systems and also handling companies, because we all know Paul is on this call here with a super set up in Hong Kong, very well managed in terms of BUPs, etc. But we also know in parts of the world that some of the warehouses were built in the 1950s and not changed. That puts a lot of constraints on what forwarders and e-commerce companies are demanding in terms of service. And that needs monitoring. It needs to be an organization that's on top of that to make sure that the cargo passes through. And the example you gave in terms of the long delay in Chicago, it means that organizations like us have to have people on the ground in the country to make sure that we're supporting. And the special word inside of the GSSA business now is that second S, which is the service, the sales part of it. Many airlines already know where the business is, but that service piece is becoming more and more crucial. So I think just to kick it off, I think the network that Hiran mentioned and having a strong network across the world is very crucial to support the supply and demand that's needed in these challenging times.
Sebastian, Steve brought up a good point. I mean, Schiphol, where you're headquartered, I think, has been in the news lately saying that the airports have to take a stronger position regarding cargo. Is that affecting in any way the airports that because you're representing airlines that go everywhere? Is what's going on in the airports affecting your ability to solve some of these problems?
I think besides maybe coming back a little bit to your first question and to the comments of Hiran and to Steve, I completely agree. I think network is key. And yes, a forwarder can take maybe a couple of freighters, but they cannot duplicate or replicate the whole network, for example, that Emirates has, or that we as KALES Group have, with 35 offices in 25 countries representing more than 70 airlines. With a lot of experience, the best experience of, we take the best of all worlds, right? So we learn from the best carriers, and we give that services like Steve correctly says. It's not only sales, it's a lot more, it's digitization, it's knowledge, it's completely unburdening the airlines, right? So coming back, so I think it's impossible to get that whole network of belly capacity. So belly capacity will remain there. Another thing I would like to comment is we the term you didn't like is preighters. The term I don't like is the new normal. I think what we always do whenever there's a situation happening, sometimes we tend to extrapolate this to the future, but business is cyclical. I think Hiran said it correctly. I mean, we've been here for many years and we've seen up and down, right? So we hope it's not going to be a big cycle, because whenever a business is doing very well for many years, people will come in and there will be more capacity, there will be more investment in until there's a certain moment that there's too many suppliers and there's too many people interested, and it goes down again until it reaches a bottom, and then nobody wants to get into it, and then it goes up again, right? So we're unfortunately we're a little bit in a commoditized industry, and I think what you said, Stan, I think that the differences on the ground, it's differences in services. We have to differentiate ourselves of just being a commodity supplier of services, right? And I agree with you. I think airports are very important. The role of Schiphol is important, just like the role of any other airport is very important, right? I mean, we're all parts of the supply chain, and you know, if an airport is working well, then it enables the supply chain, and the reverse is happening as well. So if an airport is not functioning right, then it's a bottleneck, and we've seen that in the last years. Of course, a couple of airports with a lot of over demand and therefore lack of people, which is also an issue right now, right? To get the best people and to get people also for handling agents. I'm looking forward to Paul's comment on that, because I think that's a major issue. Also speaking on behalf of my former company, I think even with trucking, it's an issue now to find drivers. So I think it's all cyclical, and but we can cope with it. I think we can cope with it as an industry because we're agile. We have proved to be agile, and we as a company, I think that's the difference as well as a GSA, and especially at KALES, we're entrepreneurial, we're agile, and we can move a little bit quicker than maybe some other bureaucratic institutions, and I think that makes the big difference.
Well, that's fantastic, you know, because you hit on two subjects, Paul, that I want to put in front of you. There's one thing that you've all heard from Courtney Robinson of ICAO. You've seen what he had to say, that governments are starting now to get involved in digitization, and they're pushing it big time. Security regimes are insisting on it now. The situation regarding safety and security comes to mind, because the only way to know what's in a package is if you have identified shippers, and you also have transparency through the whole logistics chain. And that means on the ground, we've got to change as well in order to come up with a new normal. HACTL is famous for processing, and I'm not picking on you, Sebastiaan, but he said, or Steve, whichever one said, BUPs, build up pallets. Well, that's not e-commerce. E-commerce may be build up pallets from an airline, but more airlines want to get into offering products, which means more small shipments. How are you coping, Paul? And what is your sort of take on globally of the GHA component? If the airports are being tasked now and pushed by the governments to change, if Sebastiaan says the sales GSSAs want to change, certainly on behalf of their customers, the airlines, but the customer's customer, which is the shippers and the importers, also want change. So how are the GHAs coping? And in particular, how are you reacting to this sort of modal shift from BUPs to smaller packages?
Well, I think it's during the pandemic, there has been a very big challenge for the GHA. There's no doubt, because the original setup of the airport or the air cargo terminal, in terms of the infrastructure, equipment, manpower level, that is not built for that one. So that is not sufficient enough to cope with the changes. And that effort changes put the GHA under high pressures, because you got to beef up your equipment shortly. And how are you going to beef up your manpower level and to work under a stressful environment? Yeah. For about the BUP, actually, that's right. When the cargo is upsurge, there are a lot of cargoes go for BUP, particularly in Hong Kong. And it makes a big pressure for a cargo terminal, because your cargo terminal, you need to handle a lot of BUP. But also another thing I want to highlight is that because of the pandemic, actually a lot of passenger flights are cancelled. So there are a lot of airline containers are actually sitting in the cargo terminals that eat up the capacity of the cargo terminals. So originally, maybe the cargo terminal have a very good capacity, but because of that, that actually affects the whole productivity of the cargo terminal. So as a ground handling agent, you got to make sure that your cargo capacity can maintain to a high level so that you can handle more BUP. So for us, as a HACTL, what we actually do is that we locate some of so-called empty container to the downtown stations, so that we can kind of free up our resources to handle more BUP. And of course, another thing is that when the market are keen to have more different kinds of cargo in the market, actually, they're not just BUP. We also see there are a lot of more small shipments. As we all mentioned about that, the e-commerce, we see a boom in e-commerce. There's a lot of mini shipments coming into market. So on the one hand, you need to handle a lot of BUP. On the other hand, you need to handle a lot of mini shipments. So that's why for HACTL, we see that this is going to be a trend. And this trend is going to continue and will be a key concern for GHA. So for us, we have another brand we call the HACTL, actually it's a logistic arm of HACTL. We have actually built up our e-commerce fulfillment center so that we can be able to provide more bespoke solutions and be able to handle this kind of mini shipments with a dedicated locations, and also our facilities are tailored with asset to our storage systems that give the industry more buffer. If in case they got some more mini shipments come to our e-commerce fulfillment center, we can be able to handle such kind of ad hoc storage requirement.
Oh, that raises a question of you know, you're very professional organization, been around for a long time, but a lot of airports, like the bad rap actually the airport in Chicago is getting now, and truly, if the facilities that are put up by private developers and if the GHAs are out of the control of the airport, what lessons can you give to help the GSSA and the airline to provide a decent service? What lessons have you learned that people in, like, let's be honest, Chicago or Los Angeles or maybe other airports around the world to how to cope in the future?
Yeah, I think it depends on the different airports, their different scenario, and they have their own capabilities. For us, maybe I can share from our case. For us, what we do to enhance our efficiency during the pandemic and ensure that we can always upkeep our service level. The thing is, about 23 years ago, we started up a so-called one-stop shop services. We link up three key components. One is air cargo documentation, another one is the cargo terminal operations, and the last one is freighter ramp handling. So because we link them up so that we can be better manage our resources, and all of these sections are put under one single department to manage. So that's why we can be more flexible and be more agile, where we have the market have certain requirement on particular kind of portals and have a surge in workloads. So this is what we are doing. But I think for other airports or air cargo terminals, they got to really care about their actual environment and what are their challenges, how they can adjust their resources, be it infrastructure, equipment, and manpower level, so they can have some sort of buffer and be more agile and adaptable to the changing environment.
Well, you know, Paul, that's so true what you just said, and I hope people are listening, especially in a lot of cases, the airlines and the GSSAs. I'm going to really open a can of worms here. I'm going to blame you because, you know, and I probably blame myself, but it's historical. I can blame myself about Airbridge and KLM and whatever. But the point is that you have allowed your purchasing department in some cases to overtake your marketing people in what is defined by a service level. It's cheapest price versus a menu of services that can solve it, like you've done, Paul. But then, you know, will the carriers, the airlines, Hiran, will the GHAs, Paul, will the GSSAs guys accept that the consumers in business to business and in business to consumer, right, e-commerce, demands for what the Alibaba defined, what Jack Ma defined as anything, anywhere in the world in 72 hours or less, that what we're doing now, it doesn't fit that model. And maybe that's one of the reasons why these forwarders now are going to own control capacity, because we failed in giving them what they need. Now, mind you, in 18 months, we can't rewrite the world. I accept that, but there's no problem. But what can we do about that? Anything, anywhere in 72 hours or less? You know, can we meet that challenge in the traditional scheduled cargo mode that we're involved in, or are you able to, as GSSA and as airlines, be able to introduce products into the marketplace in a collaborative way between the airline, the ground handling company, the forwarders, and actually the e-retailers, or even the shipper or consignee, because they're the beneficial cargo. They're the actual decision makers. Are you capable of that question up in the air? Can I go to Emirates, for example, Or can I go to one of the over 100 airlines that you guys represent and say, look, I've got a parcel and I want it delivered airport to door. Can you do it for me? Is that what we're headed towards for the airlines in order to retain market share? Hiran, what do you think?
Since then, I think so. Some airlines have delved into providing that end-to-end service. You are very right when you said that, in the past, airline cargo just reflected or focused only on airport to airport and didn't look at what the customer really needed. They stayed away from the headache of the first mile and last mile, as we call it now. And that kind of has evolved. We've tried to, create a product with which we call Emirates Delivers, but in a market where, or in an industry where things are, how can you say, is very fragmented, we have to do that, step by step. Develop the technology that is needed in order to make that kind of mature. So while we've taken the journey, I think it's a very long road ahead for us until that kind of product matures. But many players in the industry have come. So from the integrators who have always had the end-to-end solution, you also now have forwarders who are providing kind of e-commerce solutions. And if you look in Paul's area in Hong Kong, you have forwarders who really specialize in that e-commerce, but it moves as air cargo, but they do have e-commerce solution where they have a solution at the end to perform the last mile delivery. Post offices, their traditional business has kind of gone away with all the technology, and they've moved into the e-commerce space. So you have these different offerings of e-commerce, if you like, by the different entities. How it all ends up, I don't know how it would end up. Would there be different types of consolidation that would take place among some of these entities to provide a more robust solution? Only time will tell.
Then I'd like to challenge both Steve and Sebastiaan to the following. Your traditional base and in some cases it's sacrosanct, you only deal with freight forwarders as a GSSA, which I disagree with. But anyway, that's another discussion for another day, and maybe quite a few beers, and I'm not up to having that at 4 o'clock in the morning. But guys, I had a long discussion with the Freight Forwarders Association recently, and I challenged them. I said, look, guys, I'm not here to tell you, anything other than to say I'm worried that, the big are getting so big and they're buying out. I mean, Panalpina is gone. Who would have thought that 5 years ago? It's just inconceivable to me that an institution in our industry, and Steve, when I worked in the UK and Ireland, we had LEP, we had all these, they're all gone. Agility is going to be gone. So what does that tell me? It tells me that the big are getting bigger. They're putting, they have enough scale to put their own airplanes in, but there are hundreds and hundreds of freight forwarders who would love to have a solution from the airlines that would allow them to survive. And I don't think this is any approach to offer an airport to door solution by an airport is anti-forwarder. In fact, I think it's pro-forwarder, because it'll allow small and medium-sized enterprises to survive. We'll get into digitization in a moment, but just in the physical aspect of offering a product to these guys, what's wrong with offering the freight forwarders an airport to door product, and especially with your networks, guys? So maybe Steve, you could kick it off, and then Sebastiaan, if you could chime in, I would really appreciate your opinion on that.
Sure, Stan, and just to touch on some of the items that Hiran mentioned as well. I mean, if you cast your mind back, Stan, to the early 90s, the integrators drove a bus through our industry because they were not happy about what was going on in the warehouses and et cetera, and we are here again in the same space. And the e-commerce companies and the post offices will do exactly the same to get the business under their control, because that's what they need. You know, when capacity becomes constrained, they need to make sure that us as a consumer receive our parcel on the expected time that we've specified when we've made that order. So I think that definitely the postal services and the e-commerce guys are going to significantly change our business over the next 5 to 10 years. And in terms to your second question, you know, certainly if you're looking to increase an airline's revenue, and as a supplier to the aviation business, we're always looking at our airline customers, how we can increase, you know, value, how we can increase the revenue for the airline. Then why is there not the opportunity that that in some parts of the world we can't offer that airport to door, putting together 2 smaller forwarders from different countries and increase the revenue to the airline? I think that that's something that could be a possibility in this world that's certainly going to change in the next 10 years. And it's going to change more with the oncoming of climate change, because we've all become more aware of climate change, and we're all going to be forced in this direction to consider that when we're ordering something and having it delivered.
Sebastiaan?
Yeah, I agree, and maybe one point to what you're saying about forwarders, and from my experience of being a logistics service provider and having worked a lot with shippers myself, giving them services, and also with forwarders, I think the forwarder is not, and I know you don't think that, but the forwarder is not just somebody who cuts an aero bill and that's it, and then he buys and sells space, right? And that's how he makes his model. That's part of his model. And a forwarder does a lot more, and it really unburdens the shipper. So it's not just providing air cargo capacity. It's the pick and packing, it's the warehousing, it's the digitization, it's systems. So I think that you know, that people say, well, the forwarder will cease to exist because the model is outdated. I don't believe in that. I think the model of the forwarder is still there. What is lacking in our industry is the transparency in the corporation. So I think there's a lot of information available, but for some reasons, this information is not always shared in the stream. So information should go before the cargo flows, the physical cargo flows, right? And sometimes it goes even after. And I think that's our collective task as an industry, as a global air cargo supply chain, to improve that, right? And that's something the integrator has, but we as an air cargo supply chain have failed to do that because of some intransparent models of certain providers of services in the supply chain.
Well, I got to tell you something. If there's any subject that's not up in the air anymore, it's digitization. And I'd like to get into that right now. You've heard what ICAO has to say. ICAO is also part of the UN, as you all know, so it's representing states. And when the states get involved, I'll just give you one concrete example. The states got involved on environmental issues. They issued pollution guidelines for aviation. And lo and behold, the 777-200 freighter as we know it, and the 767 freighter as we know it, can no longer be produced after 2027 because they can't fit the proper engines on those wings. So they've got to put in something new. So ICAO can affect aviation in a big way, beyond just what you might think, issuing press releases about what we should and shouldn't do. But when ICAO and the UN get together, and I happen to be on a couple of committees with the UN and ICAO regarding digitization. One of them is basically driven by safety and security concerns, the identification in e-commerce. Paul, you're happy to know that the states are really looking into that seriously. But safety and security is not just about a bomb or about lithium batteries or something like that. It's also about cybersecurity, which is very, very important today. It's about ransomware, which you hear about. So the governments are picking up now digitization. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of digitization is the data corridors initiative that the governments are putting in place and investigating at the moment, which means that they are looking at how to facilitate trade, but also improve safety and security by transparency, Sebastiaan. So the data corridor concept will demand from the air component, because it's for sea freight and everything else, but it'll demand from the industry transparency. So it'll have to happen. And in order to work, we need things like Steve mentioned before, cargo community systems, which are variable cost for these smaller SME forwarders, because how can they afford this massive investment if we don't do something as a community to give them a solution? So I'm very keen on cargo community systems in airports, safe and secure ones, necessary to comply with UN and ICAO directives that are coming our way. But in speaking to one of the largest shippers in the world, who unfortunately embarked on one of these own controlled systems because the scheduled industry couldn't make it, he was very clear in telling me, and I'm talking about a massive shipper, okay? He said, look, when we judge aviation, we look for first speed. We want plant to plant in 48 hours. And we're not looking to penalize anybody, but if you can't do that, we don't want to hear from you. The second thing he said in the criteria to choose a forwarder or an airline was transparency. He wants to be able to see and learn about anything to do with that cargo from door to door, meaning something gets dropped on the ramp, an airplane is delayed for 3 hours, the breakdown of the cargo at the airport destination is not happening like it should. He's demanding, as a shipper using a forwarder, that he gets that information. So how can the forwarder provide it if we don't have digitization? That's another point. Third thing was quality. I don't want any damages because I don't want claims. Well, that's obvious. And then he said, only then will I talk about price. And he said, not only that, I'll talk about price by segment, meaning I'm willing to pay more for certain aspects, but if I have a shipment that could take 3 weeks and we're just putting it on the airplane because they charter whole airplanes, he said, okay, I can accept that price is a factor in that cargo. So that being said, that ICAO and the governments are pushing it, that the shippers, the major shippers who you have to, your customer has to deal with, are demanding it. What about digitization? Are you prepared to not work in a silo, meaning the GHA having their system and saying, hey, this makes me unique so that the guy down the street isn't as good as me, so the airlines will all flock this way? In the case of airlines, are you willing to embark on some segment being for the common good and then, differentiating yourself with your own IT systems? Are you prepared to join the community in this? This is what I don't see at the moment with airports that we're working with, where the cargo community systems are being introduced, that people are willing to give up a unique selling point for the better good. What's your opinion, Paul? Starting with you, what do you think?
Well, actually, for HACTL, actually we are quite supportive of such kind of digitalizations. Actually, back to about 1976, we actually built up our own cargo community system. We call it KOSAT. Now it's the third generation of the KOSAT Plus. Actually, this is a system to connect with all the agent, forwarders, airlines, custom, and ourselves. We see there's a really benefits for all the users to use such a community system so that they have more transparency on how the cargoes are moving, how is it working in the cargo terminal. So we see the value there. Actually, even in the Hong Kong Airport Authority, they are also working on such kind of similar, what we call a data platform, to facilitate all the communities. It means the freight forwarders, agents, shipper, airlines, and cargo terminal. They can use the same platform, and they can leverage this platform to check the cargo status and how is the cargo working in the cargo terminal, how is it working in the transportation process. Such kind of thing, I think, is going on a lot in Hong Kong. But we mentioned about the ICAO and UN work together, how to drive such kind of community platform. I think it all depends on on how we are going to deal with it. I think from a GHA perspective, we do think that this is a value, and that one is definitely beneficial for the whole global supply chain and the industry. But the key thing is that because there are a lot of stakeholders involved, actually, if we want to make it done, actually we got to take top-level approach with more engagement of different stakeholders like the airport or government bodies and even the airlines and so on and so forth. So as long as we have more people to get involved, and so that they have a common consensus to how to move, put it forward, and then it will be good for the whole industries and the whole supply chain.
Well, if I listen, Paul, what you've said, and I appreciate that, is you have your own systems which are very well honed and developed, but you're also willing to join a community system which is to the benefit of everyone. Am I correct in stating that?
Yes, I think what we think is that we are open for any constructive dialogue. We want, well, as long as that one, such kind of platform is beneficial for the whole aviation and supply chain community, and which also beneficial for our customers. Because it's quite important that, as I know, some airlines or some stakeholders, they may have their own concern, be it related to cost or as other concern, maybe cybersecurity. There are a lot of concern behind. As long as we can line up such kind of issue and we have some common consensus to solve all these together, I think we are able to support on this path.
That's great. Hiran, what do you think?
Yeah. Stan, I think we need to step back a bit first, because for digitization, I see two parts to it, right? Today you have all these platforms that are springing up for the booking part of it, right, for forwarders. But on the other hand, you have the operational data that needs to be digitized. Okay. Now, for all of this, and before we get all these stakeholders, or before we have a community system, we need to think of digitization standards. Okay. If you take the customer that you mentioned, who you spoke to, is he able to digitally provide his shipment data to the forwarder? Is the forwarder able to provide that to the airline and to the GHA and so on? So everyone in the supply chain has to have the same or common standards, not all of the data, but at least agreed standards. Otherwise, we will not go anywhere with this, is my view.
Well, I want to reassure you of one thing. Everything you've just addressed is being addressed.
Okay.
The US Department of Homeland Security, for example, has been very clear. Excuse me. The systems have to be open source so that everyone can join in. So all those things that you just mentioned are being.
Right.
I would welcome a call with you, Hiran. Later on, I can explain to you what this is happening.
Okay.
So it is being addressed. That's number one. The shipper involved, yes, he has that capability through APIs, and he has an arrangement. Right. But going back to the capability is one thing, which is why now that the governments are getting involved, they're not going to put up any longer with us living in a silo and saying, you know, we're not going to communicate and we're not going to work together. So they're going to get it. When the states get involved, that sort of takes care of that. So that bearing that in mind, how does an Emirates, who have excellent data systems going back forever, how does it view, for example, some of Steve and Sebastian's forwarded customers being able to communicate? You know, if it comes in on Emirates, it might have to move on let's say a truck or on American Airlines that you don't control, and they would like to have all that linked.
Yeah, so I think everyone in the chain, including the airlines, need to be able to provide digitally the data that is needed by the other party, be it customs, be it the GHA, be it the trucking provider, whoever. So once you have that, see, today you say API, right? But even for API, you don't have standards. People create API and say, this is my API, you come and pick it up. But if everyone goes and creates their own API, again, you're going to have a, sorry for a better word, unholy mess. So unfortunately, I think the standards become the cornerstone, if you like, on which we can build this and make it really successful globally. And this is a global issue, because if customs in the US want certain data or in a certain way, and customs in China want it completely differently, and don't agree on those standards, then you end up in an impasse, and you have, you add a lot of cost to the system, right? For all the parties again. So I think the fact that we need to have this digitized, I think that is the way, that should be our objective. But how do we get there? I think there are a number of steps we need to get through for it to be truly successful.
Well, Hiran, and I'll pass it over now to Steve and Sebastian, because we're going to run out of time soon. This is so stimulating and so interesting for me. But trust me, everything you just said is being addressed. And why? Because all the problems you just mentioned are being recognized now by ICAO and UN. And those standards are what it's all about. And driving this are things like, for example, identification, and also the standards have to be open source, etc. So it's all being addressed, and we should have a talk
That's
about
good.
it. Sebastian, Steve, what's your opinion?
Maybe quickly to Hiran's point, and I completely agree with him. I think the chain is as strong as its weakest link, right? So as long as you still have certain governments out there, and I'm not going to name any countries, that rather provide difficulty in order to sell facility later on, it will be very difficult to have a seamless digital supply chain. So not everybody will cooperate with it. No matter what regulations are going to be imposed, because countries are obviously sovereign, and it's not always easy to do so. So that's just towards Hiran's comments.
Steve?
Yeah, and just to follow up, we're ready to join. As an organization, we process almost 1 million shipments. That's 12 touch points at the moment, which is done manually. That's 12 million transactions. We have developers based in 3 core cities around the world, over 50 of them, developing all the time. Open up the systems, allow organizations like us to send information in whatever format you wish. We're happy to write the APIs that fit to go into here, but we don't seem to get recognized on these sort of things as an important part of this chain to provide information. And that's the key, the information. That very first initial contact with our organization provides that initial data. So can it be expanded to security? Can it be expanded to shipper details that can automatically feed into other systems? So we're ready and we're open to it. Recognize us to be able to support what you're doing.
That's good to hear, because like I said before, all the issues that Hiran raised are it's transparent. People know that that's a problem. And indeed, China, for example, has a different customs code for commodities because it wants to export them, and Europe has different commodity codes because they don't want to import them. So there's a lot of problems on the table. Okay, I'd like to just briefly, I think that the fact is that through transparency, through speed, through quality, we can maintain a very strong market and a healthy industry for scheduled airlines and for GSSAs and for handling companies. And if the large forwarders go to own controlled capacity, some may survive, some won't. They'll revert back, like Sebastian said, it's a cyclical industry, right? But in providing the services that are needed, the digitization it's a fact, guys. You embark, join, get involved, or you'll be left behind. And it's not IATA, because IATA is airlines. It's everybody, because what's good for the airlines also has to apply for a truck. It has to apply for rail. And that means that it's not an airline association that's going to solve our problems. Collaboration is good, but we have to find platforms where we can involve. Paul, quickly, it seems to me you have a tool, and you mentioned it, to provide a lot of these services to your customer base, and that's HACES. Should other GHAs think about it the same way, and should the GSSAs push their GHAs to move the way you did with HACES, thinking in the common good? I'm not talking about Hong Kong right now, but the facilitation of all of the needs, be it physical needs, I should say, seem to be available. If I look at the platform of HACES, should other GHAs embark on the same type of value adding?
Yeah, I know there are some GHA are looking at that, but I think it all depends on how is the company really commit on providing such services. It involves investments, and that involves a lot of investment, not just on infrastructure, also on the continuous investments. It's a kind of also a commitment to your customers. Because what we see in our experience is that if we provide such kind of logistic bespoke solution to our customers, we actually can help our customers to leverage our feeder service network to extend their services and explore more business opportunities. Actually, that can be good for the company and also good for the customers. So if you're looking from a partnership perspective, actually, if you build such kind of services, you can have to build a partnership with your customers, be it airlines or some freight forwarders. That will definitely help your business to grow.
Well, I can tell you that one of the committees that we're on, and one of the committees is looking into, is data corridors between governments, right? The sea, rail, road, and air. Data corridors lead me to think that if we had data corridors coupled with logistics corridors from those countries, we could offer products that are of value to the industry, to both the forwarders and to their customers. If we're going to be moving, Steve and Sebastiaan and Hiran, towards data corridors because the government is going to make it possible, what's wrong with logistics corridors or encouraging airports and GHAs to what goes in comes out in the same quality, speed, and transparency? Are you willing as a group to start pushing the airports and the GHAs that serve you to look at these things, to give you a better product so that you can meet these new demands?
Dan, certainly. Sorry if I may jump in.
No, sorry.
Certainly, yeah, because data corridors. I mean, data is across modes. I think is very key. And from where we are sitting, big CA hub, that is music to our ears. If those kind of things, finally come about. I mean, today, lot of the delay is because, of that data. You don't have accurate data until the, ship turns up, the container is unloaded, and it turns up at your facility. So if you have accurate data flowing through, I think there'll be a lot of benefits, and it will take out a lot of unnecessary costs from the system.
Oh, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
Sebastiaan?
Yeah, maybe to add to that, and maybe it's a little bit provocative that I say this, but I think the problem is the SOPs that are imposed on, for example, handling agents and road feeding services, where they're penalized if they don't deliver a certain standard of service. I think you should share your weakness. You should share your failure in the supply chain so that others can react later on towards it. If you have very harsh SOPs with penalties, people try to, that's human, right? They try to hide it maybe a little bit, and then you get the eternal blame game. No, you know what? It's the airline who came late. No, it's the trucker who came late. No, it's the handling agent who wasn't ready. No, the GSA didn't provide certain papers on time, right? I mean, stop doing the blame game. Incentivize people to share their errors. And I think that will help us a lot, to improve the supply chain.
That's an interesting point. And Steve, before you comment, let me give you one example of a cargo community system. This is real time. We've seen it with an API, and I won't comment, Hiran, whether it's globally acceptable, but with an API, the GHA is able to see, because at source where the factory is, the trucker picks it up. He knows to have, for example, 2 forklifts ready when the truck gets a slot to come to the airport at that door. He needs 2 forklifts, or he needs 10 men because it's all loose. So that, eliminates a lot of the blame game. And on the import side too, you can prepare, if you know the plane's 3 hours late and you know on board you've got horses or something, you can maneuver your staff and you can process things through the warehouse. So the blame game can also be helped with digitization, because there's no longer a blame game because it's right there.
Yep.
I mean, your trucker showed up 4 hours late because the guy had a flat tire. It's not our fault, right? So that's a good thing. Steve, what do you think?
I mean, Stan, data is king, or president, at the end of the day. That's the future of our business. The sooner that you can secure that data from that initial booking and provide the highest quality into the chain, the better. And, you know, why can't that data not only just go to an airline system, but can it not go to a handling company at that initial booking? Can it also go to customs authority? Can it not also go to final destination as AMS initially from that booking? Why not? Why does there have to be 4 different versions when one is sufficient? And you have organizations that you know, are well financed, that can put this in place and create the APIs to feed into airline systems.
Well, you know, I'm so happy to hear that, especially from 4 powerhouses as you guys are. If you institute those thoughts into your business plans, I think the industry will be much better off for it. The governments can only do so much, but they will dictate digitization. I got to tell you, I met with Dr. Liu, who is the former Secretary General of ICAO, just before she left, and Mr. Salazar took over. And she told me clear, the #1 mandate of ICAO is safety and security. And we launched some training to that effect for governments. But the second thing she said is digitization. It has to happen. And it's not a nice to have anymore. Digitization in the supply chain for the safety and security of everyone, be it economic sustainability or environmental sustainability, is a must, and it will happen. So forewarned is to be prepared. So I'm so happy that you guys have said that. And I'd just like to I got 2 more questions for you before we wrap up. I'm going to quote one of your competitors, GSSA, and that's Adrian Tomine from ECS, who's brilliant. I mean, he's actually built an empire over there. But he said that the role of the GSSA, and I would say the role of the airline as well, because the GSSA in effect is just a branch of, it's an NVOC, see, it's a non-vessel operating common carrier. That's what a GSSA is. But they have to add more value and become a one-stop shop. Going back to what you said, Paul, about HACIS and HACTL. If you're going to become a one-stop shop, that fundamentally your business plans have to change. And do you think that in some cases, I mean, in Sebastiaan and in Steve's case, you're able to dictate, right? But I mean, Hiran and I think Paul are still have bosses somewhere along the line and have to comply. But the point is, will you become an advocate of this? I'm asking you directly. Are you willing to become an advocate of creating one-stop shops in order that these SME forwarders, in particular, shippers will have confidence again in air transport after all the bad news we've had? And I'm going to challenge you one day to another statement. All of the bad reputation that airlines got about pharmaceuticals in the very beginning, and all of these, never mind, I won't give my real comment about them, all of these systems that evolved from it to handle pharmaceuticals for airlines, we wouldn't have had the problem as airlines if we had transparency and knew what was going to hit us. But the only one talking to the pharma companies was the forwarders, and the transparency wasn't there. Digitization and transparency will solve that. So we'll be better prepared. But are you prepared to commit that you will advocate for the ability to offer the customer, be it a small forwarder, a large forwarder, or a e-retailer or a shipper, to be able to get a one-stop shop from you? Steve, I'll put you on the hot seat first.
Well, I mean, Stan, first of all, I think just in words of the quotation that you said, actually the role of organizations like us, you know, cargo aviation suppliers to the aviation industry, has changed completely already. And actually, one stop is probably an old word that was used, 5-10 years ago. I mean, if you look at an organization like us, we're providing cargo service centers for airlines. We're monitoring pallet build-up. We're maximizing airlines' revenue in terms of pallet bills by making sure we have supervision there. Our speed to the market, we've invested heavily to get quotations to our customers as quickly as possibly electronically. Our investment in compliance as an organization, our cargo expertise, we have experts in pharmaceuticals, dangerous goods, live animals, our API investment to feed information to airlines and customers as quick as possible. I think all of those things combined are bringing us closer to that transparency that you're looking at. And if there's a possibility for us to increase the yield of the airlines that we represent by offering additional services, why not? Why not? Why do we not look at this scenario where we can provide all this information, improve the airline's top line, and offer services that customers are demanding across the world? The world is a lot smaller now, hell of a lot smaller, and network is key now. Rather than one-stop network, how can you connect Shenzhen to Santiago de Chile? We have an office in Shenzhen, we have an office in Santiago de Chile, so we can help to assist in terms of the export of the business and the import of the business. And that's been a key thing for us for medium to small airlines, because we can assist them that they can control their product all the way down, so that our guys in Chile can see a shipment that's arriving from our office sold in Shenzhen. So I think these are the key things that we as an organization will drive in the next 2 to 3 years, and continue investing heavily in our business intelligence and API. And it's not just talk, Stan. We're investing millions, tens of millions over the last 10 years into business intelligence to get the data from the market as quickly as possible. Why? Because if you look at the IATA system, everybody receives this information 3 months ago. That was great up to about 5 years ago. But what we need to know now is what's coming down the line. And that's what we're doing as an organization, reading that business intelligence, understanding it, and doing, predicting a little bit what the airlines want to know is, if this flight looks a little bit short, can you help fill it? Yes, we can feed from the rest of our network. So that's a quick summary from what we're doing as a corporation to drive our business inside of this industry.
Well, then I'm going to pose a challenge to Paul, Hiran, and Sebastiaan. Based on what Steve just said, it seems to me that two words that were missing in his explanation was airports, meaning having the facilities and making sure that the facilities serve the market, and the GHA, making sure that they do their job as well. So maybe Paul, Hiran, and Sebastiaan, you could comment on that. So you've got the capability end-to-end through HACTL, maybe cooperating with another GHA somewhere. Yeah. But how do you go about making sure the airports and the GHAs around the world allow what Steve said they've heavily invested so much as an industry? GSSAs have invested so much as an industry. How are you going to ensure that the airports and the GHAs understand that, and the airlines also, when they dictate to their GHAs what service standards they want, to comply with what you want? How are you going to go about that, Sebastiaan?
Well, I think maybe what Steve rightfully said, I mean, maybe to add to that, I think, and maybe to summarize it, is I think I see the GSA role, and especially at KALES, more as an orchestrator, more as a control tower that is connecting the dots, that is having the information and making the best out of that information, and making the best out of the information flows, right? So I think, again, information is key. And one item that wasn't mentioned, and that's what I think is also the future more towards the GSSA part, is the TCM, right? The Total Cargo Management Solutions. There's a lot of airlines that see that they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the experience. They will take a lot of investment in systems, in market intelligence, etc. We as a group, we have that all as KALES Group. We have the market intelligence, we have the knowledge, so we can unburden. I think that's the magic word again, is we unburden and orchestrate everything, right? So I think that's the key word there.
Well, Hiran, Emirates is famous for everything. you've got a history behind you that says that you've been a market leader and everything else. What's your opinion about how to get this data corridor turning into a logistics corridor?
Well, to get the to a logistics corridor, Stan, I think you really need the cooperation of all the stakeholders, as I said, and the standards that are built, and creating long-term partnerships with all of those stakeholders to tell them, so that unless they have the assurance that you're in a long-term partnership, people don't have the, let's say, desire to make the right investment. So I think we need to make that. And we at airports, with GHS, we've done that. We've gone and invested to build facilities, in fact, provide our expertise in building pharma facilities according to our standards, looking at GDP and so on. So such initiatives we've had, but honestly, I think if I take it at an industry level, it's not enough, right? But what also happens, I think airports also have a big role to play, because suddenly if freight gravitates to one region, one airport, and those airports become inundated, they don't keep pace with and put in the infrastructure to keep pace with that growth, then you get into all kinds of problems, right? And that somehow, I think, is a bit of a missing piece in my mind.
One of the things that we, because we have a lot of airport clients, as I told you, we keep telling them, when you design facilities, its form of the building only follows the functionality that you need in the building. And that's a big shock for a lot of people. And the second one is, be careful what you're doing, because whatever you build now you're going to be stuck with for 25 to 30 years. So you better make sure the functionality is relative to where you're operating. Paul, just the last question for you, and then I've got a bit of a challenge for all of you at the end of this. But Paul, you have in-house the capability to be a logistics service provider for the industry with HACES and HACTL. You have it.
Yes.
It's well known. It's been operating for years. What's your feeling on starting a dialogue with key trade lanes where HACTL, Hong Kong, I should say, is serving? I mean, obviously the Trans-Pacific is huge, but also Europe and the Gulf and whatever. What's your feeling about the ability of HACTL to work in strategic alliance, not investments, or we're not asking you to spend money here, but a strategic alliance, so that you can talk to the key airports that are serving the airlines are serving, should I say, from Hong Kong, in some kind of dialogue to make a logistics corridor possible between yourself and, let's say, London, Amsterdam, Paris, but also Chicago or Los Angeles or wherever the major key trade lanes are. You could pick one and start it. Amsterdam and Atlanta, I mean, COVID interrupted it, but they started on this path. I was privileged to be part of it, and I know it can work. What's HACTL's opinion on having that sort of common good to create logistics corridor possibility to have strategic alliances?
Well, I think for us, because our main customer actually airlines and freight forwarders, so actually what we can do is that we can keep our customers with close dialogue, make sure that we have such kind of capability to support their operation in Hong Kong, even other trade lanes. But if you're talking about talking to our airport, I think it's more about on the airport for this size. That maybe need to be engaged under the airport authorities to get engaged in such discussions. But for us, we are supportive of that, because we have more than 100 customer airlines. So actually, they have their own concern, their business consideration, and their or whatever concern they have because of their strategic plan for the future. So I think for us, what we are trying to do as one handling agent, we are trying to keep a great close dialogue with our customers and keep them know that what sort of capability we have, how we can support their business, and how we can go even further but it should be another party to take a lead on this one. As I mentioned, just the airport authorities or governments, they have some concern behind. They need to drive for that.
Well, Paul, I'm going to state then, based on what I've just heard, that the airport and the GHAs on that airport should be talking as one. And that means there should be a very active engagement between the developers of these buildings or the airport itself who develops the buildings. The airport community should be talking to that airport GHA developer or whoever runs the buildings as a one entity and drive it forward. So I would encourage all of you to encourage your customers to start stimulating that discussion. Well, gentlemen, I have to wrap up because we're running out of time. I could go on for hours because I got about 20 things I'd love to talk to you all about, but you know me, I tend to pontificate a bit, so I'll stop. Okay, but I've got a challenge for all of you, and that's the last question. And I'd like you also to put it in writing afterwards, and maybe send us an email. Send an email to Chris or I. And here's the challenge. You've listened and you've heard a lot of key points and challenges that we've thrown out there. I've thrown out to you. You've thrown back to us about getting governments involved in whatever. What 3 points can you take from this discussion, and perhaps from the fact that we're moving towards digitization for safety and security and cybersecurity reasons? What 3 points would you like to take away so that by next year we can review it and say to ourselves, you know, we talked about it last year and again, nothing happened. Okay, we just talked. Or we talked about it last year and something actually happens. The government did something, the airports did something, the GHAs did something, the airlines did something. Is there 3 points that stand out in your mind that you would like to see people tackling? I'll go back to you, Paul. Do you have anything that you could share with us that you take from this conversation we just had of what you'd like to do and you could actually influence yourself?
Well, I think we have been a lot of discussions about the collaboration kind of things. I think this will be going to be a new normal after the pandemic, and it's important that all stakeholders need to actually work together. And it's just not like a normal customer. It's kind of the partnerships, so that we can actually work together and share the information together. That is going to be beneficial to the whole supply chain.
So
and another thing is,
take that on as something you would like to see. You, for example, comes in small bits. You would start something or like to see something like that happening in Hong Kong.
Yeah, actually, what we are trying to do is we also see our customers as partners. We are working on that. Actually, we are working on with our customer. We share with them what we are actually doing, what we are planning to do. We also listen to them. We want to know their business, what are their plans, so that we can better plan our resources and invest more on our resources.
So more transparency would be an objective.
Yeah, that is definitely helpful.
Okay, good. Well, keep this in mind now, because I'm going to ask you to send me an email so that next year, hopefully we see you all in Rome, face to face, and we can discuss whether the group actually did anything this year. And is there a third point, maybe? What about cooperating with other airports and ground handlers to make logistics possible?
Yeah, I think it's also important. Actually, about when we talk about ground handling, we just look at our own organizations. We also look at other ground handling agents in the airport. So the first one is the airport authority also, or the whole airport, need to have a sense what is happening in the market. Are they going to invest something more on the airport, have some kind of new build up or infrastructure to support the industry? And also, I think that because all the ground handling agents at the airport actually influence each other, because under the very stressful environment, actually sometimes resources will be very stressful. That will affect the performance of other terminals.
Interesting, Paul, because what you're basically saying is airports should stop treating cargo as a rent generator and start looking at it as a marketing tool, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the summary.
Yeah, well, basically that's what it boils down to. I mean, trust me. Maybe Hiran, what would you like to see really happen? And I know sometimes you get so frustrated with talks of collaboration, but what would you like to see happen in the next year?
I think you know what I'm going to say.
Yes,
My 1, 2, and 3 are digitization standards across the whole value chain, and I think that would be the catalyst to a success in our industry, and it would solve a lot of these other things like what Paul is saying, about information. It just facilitates all of that and makes it so much more efficient.
Yeah. And are you willing to put that in writing so we can challenge you next year of what you did? Send me an email.
Sure.
One thing about the efficiency part, Hiran, you're absolutely right, because our analysis with the systems, there's such cost cuttings, and you can do so much more with less.
Exactly.
Anything else?
Exactly. Very true. No, I mean that really is, and we really want to see this succeeding, and we are happy to. We are on this path, but what is kind of what concerns us is you build something, and if things change and you have to continually keep changing, that's again not very efficient. So hence the standards.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, the 3 points I have is we know COP26 is in November. Climate change is going to have a tremendous impact on our industry in the next 10 years. If you look at every 4-engine aircraft that's parked now, will it ever return? You already mentioned earlier, Stan, about the 777s with the engines. Will they be able to continue? So I think that gathering data at source, which we can provide as an organization, will help with the carbon neutral situation that we're all driving to. If you saw Reuters, the US government confirmed that before 2030, they will reduce airline emissions by 20%. That's a huge number, huge number. And we all know that 20% is the short haul flights are a lot more efficient than the longer haul flights. So our third point would be, to recognize that as an organization, we can gather that information very quickly at source and feed it into the relevant systems along this path to give the transparency that you recognized before, whether that be handling companies, whether that be community systems, but we have that data and we can feed it in. So there would be my 3 points then.
Okay, well, the good news is that the 777-200s that exist today will continue to fly. They're not going to be taken down, but the new aircraft, the 350 freighter and the 777, I think it's called 9X or something, or XF, there you go, XF, are definitely going to come to market. They have to. So they'll be fuel efficient, but I think I've even seen that some of the old 200s have been pulled out of the desert and are flying today, but that'll go away quickly. Sebastiaan, what's your 3 points?
Yeah, it's always the benefit of being the last. So I think a lot of good points have been mentioned. I just would like to mention one point, and because we're a little bit, and I'm also a big part of it. We're always complaining about how our industry is not cooperating, how it should become more efficient. It's not digital, it's not cooperative, it's not transparent, etc. On the other hand, look what we have accomplished as an industry in the last 1.5 years. And I would like just to quote here the subtitle of an article in The Economist. And well, the title says why skippers aren't scruppered, but the subtitle says global supply chains are adapting, not failing. I think that summarizes very well what we have done as well as an air cargo industry. And we have been adapting, we have been accommodating. I mean, at the end, everybody has got the, no, not everybody, but the people who have ordered have gotten their vaccines. The people who are ordering their e-commerce have gotten their e-commerce shipments. I mean, we have made it possible. We have made it possible. I think we should also, instead of being negative, a little bit negative about it, and I'm the first one that always complains that we should improve. Also, maybe give us a big clap on the shoulders for what we have accomplished here all together. With the companies present here. Without the joint effort, we couldn't have made this possible. The world would have come to a standstill without us. It's as simple as that. So I think that's one great achievement.
But then,
I hope,
Sebastiaan, if I could just interrupt for a second, what you're saying basically is we've learned a lot of lessons as well for the good, right?
yeah.
How can we make sure they continue?
Well, that's the other point. I hope that in 1 year from now, even though, and I hope that the passenger capacity is going to come back, because that means that we're going to go a little bit back to normal, right? And the people, you know, they are going to get less sick from COVID, and we get, you know, a healthier world. That we are still being perceived as very relevant in the industry, because all of a sudden, you know, we're making headlines in CNN and The Economist, etc. Before we were the, you know, like they say in Dutch, I don't know if you have the same saying, the ugly duck, right, of the family. You know, cargo is always you know, the ugly duck of the airport. Cargo is always the last priority of an airline. I mean, I really hope that we continue to become and to remain very relevant to the industry in boardrooms of airlines, in boardrooms of airports, of freight forwarders, of shippers, etc. So I think that's a major thing that I hope that we can accomplish, and it's up to us to remain relevant, right?
I agree. I just like to, I was talking to Des Vertanis a few days ago, because we remain in constant contact, and we were reminiscing over a study that was done by IATA in the past. And it was shocking to a couple of actually it was shocking to the National Research Council in the US, who I first mentioned it to. But when they did an analysis of all the revenue of the airlines quite a few years ago, 4%, actually 3% was coming from first class, 14% was coming from business class, 71% was coming from economy, and 12% was coming from cargo. So 3-4 times more than first class, and almost equal to business class. Yet you never heard cargo mentioned in the boardrooms of 90% of the airlines around the world. Now that's all changed. First class, as you know, is almost becoming extinct because the business class products are overcoming it. Business class travel, if you listen to what I'm hearing from everybody we talk to, is never going to come back to what it was. And tourism is going to suffer for years to come, because there's two things to consider: COVID, but also the financial impact on families of COVID. So discretionary travel will be a little bit less than it was in the past. But if cargo is now being, if ever cargo had a chance so if I had a wish, it would be next year. We're saying that the CEOs and the CFOs of airlines finally have understood that cargo is a core business and not a contribution. Last week, one of the major European carriers announced that ancillary revenue has all of a sudden become 50% of their sales. And guess what's in ancillary revenue for them? Cargo. I said, there we go. They haven't learned. Hiran.
Stan, sorry, what I want to say is, you mentioned something very interesting about these, you know, the revenues from first and business class. But how about profitability? I think profitability of cargo is a lot higher, because you don't make all that spend like you know, first and business class and so on. You know, you don't have all that real estate, and so that's something to ponder as well.
Okay, gentlemen, I've run out of time. I want to thank you. I mean, I could go on all day all morning talking to you guys. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Steve, Sebastiaan, Paul, Hiran, you guys are thought leaders and also leaders in what you do, and you're well respected, and I really respect you. That's why I wanted you so much on this panel. So thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to everybody. Digitization, guys, that's in my wish list for next year. Hopefully face-to-face we can meet in Rome and discuss the success of what we've just put on the table. And with that, I want to thank you once again. Have a great day or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be. And to all of our audience, I hope you found this as stimulating as I did. I mean, it's been a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did in sharing it. So have a great day and have a great week as well. Thank you very much.